All right, we on air. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Emunah Yes for L, Solonomics 101, Left Project. And this is our 10th installment, if you can believe it, 10 weeks of, feels like a college course. You know what I'm saying? Feel like we're supposed to get graded after this. But it's, 10, you know what I'm saying? You go 12 weeks, you do your semester, you get your credits. Mayanah, how many credits we getting for this? Welcome, Mayanah. How you doing?
Hey sis, thank you for having me once again.
Like, are these credits transferable, Sister Mayanah? Like,
Absolutely.
they're
You pay
trying.
this forward into the future. Next time somebody comes up to you and uses the word feminist, you say, I don't think you're using that word correctly.
Oh, see, now you get to rebuke them, in a loving way,
Of
and
course.
rebuke them all the way back to the 70s. For those who have just joined us, this is our 10th installment of, it's not the Angry Black Woman anymore. It's the Double Jeopardy.
Jeopardy,
There
right.
we go, of the Black Woman series. Once again, this is definitely research that's going to go into the upcoming book because just dispelling a lot of these myths. I hope if those of you are tuning in, you're getting some value from it. I did get that, ever so often thumbs down. So I'm guessing somebody's not liking the material that we found. Like, it could possibly be us, but we ain't make it up. So I don't know what they're thumbs down in, but feel free to share what about the conversation you don't like. And maybe you might have some other sources that you would like to add to, round up the niceness of the conversation. Hey, we're open to that. So
Oh,
without further ado, we apologize for the tardiness. I especially, like I said, babies was doing what they do. We are on, what page are we on, Sister Miami? We're almost finished.
yeah, we're on page 42, but because it continues from page 41, it was your turn to read. So I would
Yeah,
go back to the last sentence in
yeah.
page
Actually,
40.
wasn't I left off on this quote right here. I kind of remember because you was thinking that I should get to the quote and then we had put it right there where it says black women take kindness for weakness. That quote right
Yeah.
there. Right, cool. All right, so I just want to make sure of that. And let me go
So
ahead.
just to give the people context, go back to the sentence that precedes it. Let's kind of fall dead into the
You
quote.
want to go through the whole thing or
No,
you
no, just the last
the
sentence. The last
last
sentence on
last
page
paragraph?
41.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, hold on.
Starting with, but the myth was perpetuated.
Oh, unfortunate. That part right there.
No, just the last sentence. But the myth was perpetuated.
I must be looking at it something different. We on port page
Go
40.
ahead and start from how fortunate. Go ahead,
Oh,
you can
right
start
there,
from
right
there.
there, right there, right there. Okay, cool.
No, I think you were right to just go ahead and start from the top. From how unfortunate.
And again, if you would like to be on the other side um, uh, of this conversation and you have some other things to add, feel free. Feel free. We're opening up new spaces where you don't necessarily have to be behind your computer mumbling and complaining. You have the option to have what is the word I'm looking for here? Fruitful dialogue, um, where we're not necessarily arguing and doing all of that, but we're able to voice our opinions in a respectable way and hopefully glean from one another. So, with that said, let's jump on over here. And I'll start from the preceding paragraph. It says, how unfortunate that quote unquote blacks and whites have allowed the most trying and bitter experience in the history of black people to be interpreted as the beginning of a quote unashamed plot end quote to usurp the very manhood of black men. Why it's good that we went back here because this is still what's being said today.
Right.
um, I'll read that again because maybe I'm just a little slow right now. She says it's unfortunate that so called whites and blacks have allowed the most trying and bitter experience in the history of black people to be interpreted as the beginning of an unashamed plot, end quote, to usurp the very manhood of black men. But the myth was perpetuated, and thus what brought the alternation of roles in Algeria was distorted and systematically employed to separate black men and so-called black women in America. Now she goes on to quote, black women take kindness for weakness. Leave them the least little opening and they will put you on the cross. It will be like trying to pamper a cobra. Hmm. Let's see where she get that quote from.
Thanks
Interesting
for
quote.
so nice.
Eldridge Creed, Soul and Ice. Oh, Black, and this was one of the leaders, huh, in the Black Power Black women take kindness for weakness and leave them the least little opening. Does that sound so? This goes to the thought that they weren't confident that the melanated man really had their back. If you're gonna have a comment such as this, but we'll discuss it as we go on. Unless we realize how thoroughly the American value of male superiority and female inferiority has per- permeated our relationships with each other, we can neither appreciate the role it plays in perpetuating racism and keeping so-called Black people divided. I agree. And you gotta. Most, but not all, American relationships are based on some type of exclusive, no, quote, exclusive competition of the superior and the exclusive competition of the inferior. This means essentially that the poor, the uneducated, the deprived, and the minorities of the aforementioned groups compete among themselves for the same scarce resources and inferior opportunities, while the privileged, middle class, educated, and select white minorities compete with each other for rather plentiful resources and superior opportunities for prestige and power. Competition among groups is rare.
Hold on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I have a question from the audience. Did we post the link for the YouTube?
I posted again. I put it on my wall. Hold on. Let me go ahead and let me see. I think you created a thing, so I'm gonna put it right here.
Where you put?
I'm putting it in the group. Um, and I posted it on my wall as well. Hold on. I'll post it on your wall.
All right. You're putting it in the group right now?
Yep.
Awesome.
And
Apologies to the audience. We're trying to accommodate everybody as they come along. Thank you for your patience.
All right, hold on. And so, yeah, definitely tune in. We're reading again. We haven't changed for the last 10 weeks. We're still reading, taking out our fine tooth comb. We're taking Saudi's comb. And if you was here from the beginning, you know who Saudi is. You know what I'm saying? And we taking Saudi's comb, getting all the baby hairs, making sure we get all the kitchen and everything going on. So there, I posted it there, Sister Miranda, for whoever may be inquiring.
We got them.
All right.
But I apologize. I apologize to the audience for that.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay, then. So where are we? It says competition among groups is rare due to the fact that elements who qualify are almost invariably absorbed to some extent. Hold on a second, please. Sorry about that. The babies is over there rolling the boat. Competition among groups is rare due to the fact that elements who qualify are mostly invariably absorbed to some extent, note the Black middle class, by the group to which they seek entry. We may well understand that there is only one equal relationship between man and woman, Black and white, in America. And this equality is based on whether or not you can force your way into qualifying for the same resources. And lastly, last paragraph, but instead of attempting to modify this competitive definition within the so-called Black community, many, quote, Black, unquote, males have affirmed it as a way of maintaining the closure of male monopolization of scarce benefits and making the domination of males, end quote, impenetrable to Black females. This is, of course, very much the American way of exploitation. So apparently she's quoting someone. She has a lot of quotes going on here, referring to a lot of conversation that's happening. Sister Mayanah.
Well, I think that this is a very interesting line that she is drawing to connect different types of exploitation. Here we see that she's not viewing this the space that the men are vying for as something that will help to forward the joint efforts of the people. Instead, this kind of binary where there's a male superiority that necessitates a female inferiority, finding seriously problematic. And again, you and I have very often stated that there's no way to advocate for equality because in doing so, it is to advocate for sameness. And obviously, the masculine and the feminine do not have the same. But distinct value. And I think that she's trying to kind of introduce this, that there's room for both, room for them to occupy the same space without having to have the same minutes. And this kind of competitiveness is not due to anything that is the internal mechanisms of the Black family or the Black relationship, but instead it's coming from some external force.
You're breaking up a little, sis. You're breaking up a little.
I think I hear there's a bit of a fan or something going on coming from here.
I don't know where the fan coming from, but let me see if you can hear it now. Go ahead.
All right. Is that better? Do we?
Yeah, you sound close enough.
So what I was saying is that it sounds as if she's saying that this kind of competitiveness is not something that is happening inherently between the inside of the Black family or the Black thought between the melanated man and the melanated woman, but instead it is a foreign or alien thought that's introduced to them to force them to compete for resources, and that idea that there has to be this kind of oppressive masculine superiority has very serious drawbacks.
What are your thoughts on the quote that she drops? I didn't read. I know you earlier, a couple of episodes.
Well, yeah, that sounds very. This is very classic Eldridge Cleaver, who has very negative opinions about melanated femininity prior to his marriage to Kathleen, who he didn't marry. And Kathleen Cleaver seems to have at least temporarily tempered his opinion of the melanated woman, but to say that the Black woman take kindness for weakness, the idea that you can't give her any space or she will, get out of control, this idea that you have to control feminine energy, otherwise it will overwhelm or disturb you. I think that it's interesting that he said it's like Empress or Cobra. I mean, it's like negative imagery there, and I'm curious about this other allegory. I'm curious about the other allegory where he says they will put you on the cross. I'm wondering if that's a Christian allusion or if it's a slavery allusion. The idea of being thrown on this wooden machine as part of a torture element in slavery, or if this is another kind of allusion to that Christian martyrdom, being thrown on the cross. So I'm curious about that particular metaphor, but yeah, those are my thoughts about that particular quote.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm gonna have to read the book. I haven't gotten around to reading it, but again,
Did I send it to you?
No, you didn't shoot it to me. I didn't read it yet, but before we go on, that begs the question for those who don't know, who is Eldridge Cleaver to this whole at the time of the 70s Black Power conversation? So for those who don't know, it can kind of help them to get an understanding of the tone of this whole manifesto that we're reading. If this is one of the quotes of the leaders, can you give them a little bit more information, shortly, briefly about who this person is as it relates to?
As you said, he was one of the prominent leaders of the Black Panther movement, alongside of Stokely Carmichael and others. And there's this idea that there's a feminine principle's chief contributions had to do with her sexual abilities to satisfy the men, or somehow there's that sexual gratification would keep the men focused. And there was quite a bit of misogyny within this particular movement on the side of some, not all, but of some of these more prominent leaders. And Eldridge at the time was among them. He had this curious ideas about what rape or the benefits of raping women. He was, at the time that he wrote Soul on Ice, he was incarcerated for rape. So, and he chronicles some of his experiences there. So it's a good read. In other episodes, I cover some of the quotes from the book, and I have I'm still willing to share that book with anyone that would like me to send it to them.
All right, excellent. Sounds excellent. Okay, we could move on. I'm here trying to see if I can find this next quote. The myth of the the butch of the black matriarchy. Because I think that possibly, just for personal reasons, I would love to look into that text right there. But
Absolutely.
oh, you have that. You have the myth of the black matriarchy as well.
I do. I really do.
See, all right, holla at me, Sister Mayanah, off air. All right, Sister Mayanah, yeah, those two would be, they would be nicely appreciated. Thank you kindly, um, as we continue this conversation. But go ahead, Sister. You could pick up. Um,
The order of logic, which makes it possible to pronounce as Dr. Robert Staples that, quote, black women cannot free qua women, all women, oh no, but that what it's supposed to be, women until all blacks attain their liberation. Maintains, whether purposely or not, that black women will be able to separate their femaleness from their blackness, and thus they would be able to be free as blacks, if not free as women, or that male freedom ought to come first, or finally, that the freedom of black women and men and the freedom of black people as a whole are not one and the same. Only with the concept of role integration can we hope to rise above the petty demarcations of human freedom that America is noted for, and that are unfortunately inherent in Dr. Staples' remarks. Role integration is the realization that ego attachments to particular activities or traits must be abolished as a method of determining malehood and femalehood. That instead, attachments must be distributed to a wider variety of tasks and traits in order to weaken the power of one activity in determining self-worth and the flexibility of a people in affecting role alternation and role integration has been an historically proven asset to the survival of any people. Witness yes, Israel, China, and Algeria. Thus, the unwitting adoption and the knowing perpetuation of this American value reflects three interrelated situations. Should you read those three? That's on the next page.
Now you can read the three, sis.
Black people's growing sense of security and well-being and their failure to recognize the expanse of Black problems. Black people's over-identification with the dominant group, even though the survival of Blacks in America is not assured, and Black people's belief in the myth of, quote, matriarchy, close quote, and their subsequent rejection of role integration as unnatural and unnecessary. And that concludes that portion.
All right, for those who just joined us, we are on, what page is this? We are on page 43 of the pamphlet, making our way through. Very interesting, some things to pick up on there. Sister Mayanah just read that portion, and I'm trying to catch it. What are your thoughts on what you just read, Sister Mayanah?
Well, I think that she's here identifying that, again, this adoption of this foreign thought and this foreign idea is venomous, it's poisonous, and it's not to our detriment and not to our benefit. And she highlights here three cases. One of it is that we fail to really understand the expanse of this, the degree to which we are in trouble. We have failed to identify and really embrace the problems that we are facing. We talk all the time, you and I, about the fact that there's a need for healing a broken past. There's a lot of broken people trying to embrace, solutions without first fixing that brokenness. So she speaks to that. And then there's an over identification with the dominant group. And again, that kind of speaks to not having the necessary set apartness, not having the necessary lens to say not everything that works for the euro is going to work for us, because we don't have a shared history with those peoples. And so trying to identify with the people that simply we cannot, that we don't share anything with, is going to be a problem. And finally, she talks about this idea of embracing that matriarchy that we spoke about before, was introduced by Moynihan. This is not a vilifying the feminine principle, vilifying her presence in the home, vilifying any type of contribution she may make in an active or proactive sense, that all of those things somehow scratch away or diminish the contributions, authority, or value of the man. That everything the woman does is somehow jeopardizes the male's space, or somehow puts him in a critical, even fatal kind of position, and that the men have internalized that fear, and they have internalized that myth, that narrative, that kind of corruption. And so having been duly corrupted, it's kind of spreading and causing a divide by design. There's a divide by design, and she's bringing it to our attention so that we become cognizant of the poison that we are willingly ingesting.
You know, as you are speaking, and I know we're not at the end of this, but as I'm allowing all that we've read over these 10 weeks to really, settle within me to get an understanding, what I so far, like, to kind of sum it up, is like the expectations are unrealistic as it relates to both parties, as it relates to the male view of what the female should represent. Meaning, it appears that the thought is she should absorb the shock of a reality that she didn't create. You know what I'm saying? To make it most comfortable for him. And however she deals with it, well, that's kind of on her. You know what I mean? That this is, I don't know if it's just me or I'm just bugging out today or whatever, but the way that the grievances is that, for me, this is kind of what we're hearing in this manifesto, are some of the objections to what has been said to them and the grievances. And it sounds to me it's like, okay, you're overloading my system because your system can't take it, and then whatever I do with it is on me.
Right.
And and then, so at one point be the superwoman, at the next point I hate you for being the superwoman, um,
Right.
which leaves her in limbo, like where is she supposed to go from there? You know what I mean? What do you do with that? Do you crumble or do you stand up? That's just my thought. I don't know. That just had the thought, but I'll continue. Uh, while the rhetoric of so-called Black power and the advocates of cultural nationalism laud so-called Black people for their ability to struggle under oppressive odds, they simultaneously seek to strip away or incapacitate the phenomenon of role integration, the very means by which so-called Blacks were able to survive. They seek to replace it with a weak, intractable role separation, which would completely sap the strength of the so-called Black power movement. Right, there's not power there, of the Black movement, because it would inhibit the mobilization of both women and men. It was this ability to mobilize Black men and women, Black women, that guaranteed survival during slavery. So to me, she's like, you're taking away our defense mechanism. This is our survival
Right.
mechanism, and you're trying to take that away. Um, and we did see that it was systematic in other spaces, like in the book we spoke about, labor of love, labor of sorrow. It was the shaming by the European who wanted the melanated man to feel as though his wife wasn't suitable enough to stay at home. And because it was this kind of reverse psychology, the European went on a campaign to shame him,
Right.
that your wife is lazy and she just doesn't want to work, and you shouldn't let her pimp you like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Meanwhile, your wife is over there making tea and crumpets. So it was a systematic, like she says, weakening and separation of the two in order to continue to remain in control. The strength of role integration is solely overlooked as so-called Blacks throw away the hot comb the bleach cream, the lie, and yet insist on maintaining the worst of American values by placing the strength of the so-called black woman in the traction of the white female status. I would,
Mm.
yeah, I had to meditate on that. I had to swallow on that. She was like, externally you did away with it, but internally you're still holding these values, which is problematic. Because what she's saying is, if you disable me, then I can't help you. That's what I'm hearing her say. You know what I'm saying? If you put me in this box, that's not how we survived up until this point. So if you try that now when we're still in the hot waters, it's gonna prove fatal.
Right.
That's what she's basically saying. I would think black men would want a better status for their sister, so-called black women. Indeed, black women would want a better status for themselves, rather than a warmed over throne of
Mm.
women's inferiority,
You almost
which
forgot to see me bucket shots, right?
yeah, she bucks this. I tell you, this is parasol lady. She bucks shots everywhere, like pow 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 pow. Yeah, she said warmed overthrown. You know how you sit in a place where somebody sat. I don't like warm booty seat. You know what I'm saying? Where somebody sat there mad long, you can feel their booty warmed it up. I don't like that. So when she said warmed overthrown, that's what I imagined in my head. Like you was here too long. You know what I mean? I need it cold. I don't need your butt on it and then me on it. But anyway, rather than a warmed overthrown of women's inferiority, which so-called white women are beginning to abandon. Though most so-called white women's lib advocates fail to realize the possibility, their subsequent liberation may spell a strengthening of the status quo values from which they sought liberation. Since more and more women will be participating in the decision-making process, those few women participating in the quote-unquote struggle will be outnumbered by the more traditional middle-class women. This means that the traditional women will be in a position to take advantage of new opportunities with which radical women's liberation has struggled to win. Voting studies now reflect that the traditional women, middle class and above, tend to vote the same way as their husbands.
Mm.
Because so called blacks have dealt with these husbands in effort to secure jobs, housing, and education, it does not seem likely that so called blacks will gain significantly from the open mobility of less tolerant women whose viewpoints differ little from those of their husband.
That's right.
Sister Maya.
That's right. I mean, 'cause, you know, she throwing shade, but she's right. I mean, because first of all, she begins with talking about the basic kind of um, amputating that we're doing by cutting off these working limbs and not allowing the woman to do her job, to be the easier, to be the help, to contribute significantly to the emancipation of the people. But some of these other images that she's talking about are also very, very true. This idea that somehow uh, being a part of the so-called white women's liberation movement and expecting for her to hold up the ideas that she is forwarding, say, oh, we're all women. She's like, yeah, okay, well, Missy Ann, last I heard, you're gonna do what your dude did, so running around with you is not a good look. It's very much the same as there was no feminine solidarity during slavery. The white woman was just as aggressive and vulgar and violent against black female bodies. They weren't sitting around, bonding over their uteruses any other time. And so there's no reason for black women in the 70s to think any different, in 1970s to think any different of the white woman in 1870s, because they're already on record as doing what is beneficial, only what is beneficial to them, to the extent that it's beneficial to them. Even all of these ideas of abolition was tied to they wanted to be outside too. So it wasn't always purely altruistic. So this idea, what the sister is saying here is like, I see you. I know that you have never been truly or purely altruistic. And never at any point where it didn't benefit you did you stand out for us. And so we still don't trust you, lady. And so there's a lot of that. And I really kind of appreciate that honesty. The other writers allude to it, and all of them quite intelligently, some of them even poetically. But she is being very, very as we would say, raw or quote real.
Right. Yo, so far she's like like you said, everybody like worked up to this point and they left the best for last. Because she just like, she bucks her shots and she's not hiding, you know, her
Right.
thoughts. She's like throwing shade all day. So definitely, but for the sake of time, we could go on. We could go on.
All right, so we'll continue. Um, if white radical thought has called upon the strength of all women to take a position of responsibility and power, can blacks afford to relegate black women to, quote, home and babies, end quote, while white women reinforce the status quo? The cry of black women's liberation is a cry against training a very much needed labor force and agitating force to a role that once belonged to impotent, impotent, apolitical white women. Blacks speak lovingly of the vanguard and the importance of women in the struggle, and yet fail to recognize that women have been assigned a new place based on white ascribed characteristics of women rather than on their actual potential. The Black movement needs its women in a position of struggle, not prone. The struggle Black face is not taking place between knives and forks at the washboard or the diaper pail. It is taking place on the labor market, at the polls, in the government, in the protection of black communities, in the local neighborhood power struggles, in the housing and in education. Can blacks afford to be so unobservant of current events as to send their women to fight a non-existent battle in dishpan? Even now, the black adoption of the white values of women has begun to show its effects on black women in distinctive ways. The black liberation movement has created a politicized, unliberated copy of white womanhood. Black women who participate in the struggle have failed to recognize, for the most part, the unique contradiction between renunciation of capitalistic competition and the acceptance of sexual colonialism. The failure of the Black movement to resolve and deal with this dilemma has perpetuated the following attitudes in American politicized Black women. Read on, sis.
Yeah, I'm gonna read on, but again, I feel a bit of urgency in what it is that she's saying, and I noticed this in a lot of the spaces that we're in. It's this polarizing thought. You know what I'm saying? Is either you got to be on the battlefield or you got dishpan hands. So in order to show the value of the battlefield, then I have to diminish the value of being at home,
Right,
which causes a problem in the long run. You know what I'm saying? In the long run, if you're not there, we see what happened. We're here
right,
today. You know what I'm saying? So, in retrospect, playing Monday morning quarterback, you see where the extremes, where you didn't find a middle ground, where it is that, yes, you cannot totally abandon the home front to go to war. Like if everybody
right,
goes to war, what are you going to war for? Because if you don't survive and you don't protect the future, then you just negated the whole point of going to war for surviving. But
right,
I hear the urgency in her voice, but I also hear the short sightedness of the argument. You know what I mean? Um, all those years ago. But for the sake of time, I'll continue. The belief in the myth of matriarchy, the so called Black woman, has been made to feel ashamed of her strength. And so, to redeem herself, she has adopted from these whites the belief that superiority and dominance of the male is the most natural. Oh, sorry, let me get the quotes. Quote, natural, end quote, normal, end quote, relationship. She consequently believes that so-called black women ought to be suppressed in order to attain that natural balance. End quote. Man, are we hearing this conversation today?
right. Then we just talk about this kind of martyrdom that gets
Yeah,
exalted above any
yeah.
type of agency. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're hearing this. Okay, because the so-called white woman's role has been held up as the example to all of black women, many so-called black women feel inadequate and so ardently compete in in quote unquote femininity while white females for black males attention with white females for black males attention. She further competes with quote black families, not quote black families in an attempt to be the, blackest and most feminine. That's, oh my goodness. What? She like Back to the Future. I think she Michael J. Fox. She
Yeah, I
jumped
think
into 2017 and she ran back real quick. Thereby, she was like, "Whoop, I'm here." Thereby, the more superior to her fellow blacks. Wow. Let me read this slow. She further competes with so-called black families in an attempt to be the quote blackest and the most feminine end quote. Thereby, the more superior to her fellow black sisters in appealing to the so-called black politicized men. She competes also with the apolitical black female in an attempt to keep so-called black males from regressing back to females whom she feels have more quote practice end quote in the traditional role of white women than she has. So there's an issue going on at that space.
wow.
There's an issue of you're not like again in the cult of domesticity, you're not woman enough. You're not
Right.
really a woman. You're not, and so now they're using this as a point of contention. She
Yeah.
doesn't know how to point, she doesn't know how to set tea like I do. She doesn't know how to make a roast as I do, and fighting in this space. This is very interesting.
Very interesting.
Fine, it sounds very familiar. Like this thought is back. Like they say, fashions recycle every 20 or so
Yeah.
years. So, this has recycled back and it's definitely here. And we had a whole conversation on this. So if you missed it, check it out. Finally, she emphasizes the traditional roles of women, such as housekeeping, children, supportive roles, and self-maintenance. But she politicizes these roles by calling them the role of black women. She then adopts the attitude that her job and her life is to have more children, which can be used in the vanguard of the so called black struggle. Black women, as the song quote unquote Black Pearl relates, have been put up where they belong. But by American standards, it is so inconceivable that the American value of respect that child or free or feed it. No, let me read that again. It is so inconceivable that the American value of respect, that child or feed it, she got to be bringing that somewhere. Does the vanguard of which Dr. Staples so reverently speaks recognize the existence of the term bastard? And of course, I'm going to have to read the reference because I'm at a loss for words because apparently she's referencing, the myth of black matriarchy. So, Sister Mayana, you come in at this point.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that the song Black Pearl. It's a song that was written by two Jewish white men, and but it was sung by a black man. I forget his name. And it talks about the woman being elevated, being celebrated, the black woman being elevated, being celebrated, being treated like a queen. Again, ironically written by white men.
But
And
we got the
sung,
song. We got the song.
you got
We got the song. You don't have to look it up. So let's hear what the song is saying. Ooh, ooh, hey, hey, my. Black Pearl, precious little girl, let me put you up where you belong. Black Pearl, pretty little girl, you've been in the background much too long. You've been working so hard your whole life through, tending other people's houses and raising up their children too. Hey, how about something for me and you? Here in my arms, you're gonna reign supreme. No more serving, baby. They're gonna serve my queen. It's our turn for happiness, and our day has come, living for each other and answering to no one. Black Pearl, precious little girl, let me put you up where you belong. Okay, and they repeat that. And then they say, together we stand so straight and so tall, created by love to love one and all. Hey, heart to heart, soul to soul. No other one could ever take your place. My world is built around the very smile that's on your face. You'll never win a beauty show. No, they won't pick you. But you're my Miss America and I love you. Wow. Mm. And then they go on to repeat. Uh, that's the essence of it. Black pearl, black pearl. So go ahead, sister.
right, which is again, having heard the lyrics, and it's being sung by a brother, but it's written by these two very white men. This ode to black femininity is written by white men. So I thought that was interesting. But anyway, someone once suggested that the word bastard be deleted from the values of black people. Would it not be more revolutionary for blacks to advocate for a 5-year moratorium on black births until every black baby in American orphanages were adopted? by one or more black parents. When blacks could really have a valid reason, then blacks could really have a valid reason for continuing to give birth. Children would mean more than simply a role for black women to play or fuel for the legendary vanguard. Indeed, blacks would be able to tap the potential of the existing children and could sensibly add more potential to the black struggle for liberation. To do this would be to do something no other civilization, modern of course, has ever done. The blacks would be allowing every black child to have a home and not just a plot in some understaffed children's penal farm. What makes a healthy black baby in an orphanage different from, quote, our own flesh and blood, close quote, except for the American value of inferiority, superiority, and the concept of, quote, bastard, end quote, that accompanies it. There is nothing, quote, wrong, close quote, with the orphan child, save what white society has taught us to perceive. We can conclude that black women's liberation and black man's liberation is what we mean when we speak of the liberation of black people. I maintain that the true liberation of black people depends on their rejection of the inferiority of women, the rejection of competition as the only viable relationship between men, and their reaffirmation of respect for general human potential in whatever form, man, child, or woman, it is conceived. And that is the end of the Black Women's Manifesto, 1970s.
Damn, I wish I had one of them little I need a sound effect system, Mayanah. Like you know what I mean? Like something that just like break the whole Jeezy. I'm gonna find my sound effect because basically, yeah, man, we did 10 weeks on this.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did. That was like felt like a little marathon there. But
I really like this last part. And I have to say, I really, really like that idea. I mean, I know it sounds a bit, actually, close to us, but this idea of there being a moratorium on black births until every black baby in American orphanages were adopted by one or more black parents. I think that is a phenomenal idea. But not only that, because it is connected to some of the other conversations that we have around polygyny. And mentioning polygyny in this context is not altogether odd because even in the 70s, when they were having this kind of re-investigation into their own agency, the black men, in order to affirm their masculinity, started to propose what? Polygyny, right? And so, of course, there was that same, some embraced it, some pushed, in terms of women, some embraced it, and some gave a pushback. And then there's still, in this conversation here in 2017, there's this idea of, oh, we're doing this because the women need it, right? There's this idea, but what about all of the children? We have children that are not being accounted for. You don't need to make new babies. Idea of nation building, we have this population effort. And it's not as if we're at we have a lack of population. Like we're not at a lack of populace. We have plenty of children that don't have homes. Right now, we see a lot of our melanated babies in the designer pocketbooks of European celebrities. They're carrying them around like poodles and puppies, saying, "Look at the little brown baby that I picked up," and then using it as part of their celebrity props. And so I think that this suggestion isn't as radical as it sounds at first blush. I think there's some potential for practicality in it.
Yes, and that would lead to, like you're saying, what's the real motive behind what people are saying when the opportunity to show, your kindness and your love for your nation is already there. They're children who are already here. You know what I'm saying? And so that selflessness that, again, like you're saying, a lot of the champions for the institution of polygyny to rebuild the black family, the ability for you to show your selfishness is here. Right. You know what I mean? You have countless. Actually, some statistics say that proportionally there are more melanated babies in foster care and in these spaces than there are others, as it relates to our population here. And so, how many people in their efforts to rebuild, instead of saying you're going for to start anew, how many are reaching out to those spaces? So I definitely understand that. That's a question we could bring to the book. That's a question we could bring to the book, sis. I mean, it might be, that's it might be met with a bit of disdain, but it's a reality, and you do see, as you said, other nationalities around the world racing to be able to quote adopt and take in and foster the care of our people. So where are you? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Where are you in your nation building efforts to do the same, if not more? Um, so, like you said, we came to the end of this conversation. It's been really eye opening. I hope you were able to learn and glean something from it. I know I did. And, for somebody, we have a 10-part series to direct someone to the next time they say, look, Sister Maya, the next time they open up the lip to form the word, you know what I'm saying? Be like, please go ahead and go through this and then come back and let's have. And that's the thing. And I'll say my closing thoughts on this, and I'll let you say. It's one thing to repeat rhetoric, is another thing to substantiate your viewpoint. And if people are not at least willing to go do the work so that they can have an informed conversation, then one has to question what is their motives to begin with. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If they say, I don't have to read that, but yet you ask, where are you sourcing this from? I don't have to tell you. Then what is this conversation really about? And so hopefully we break out of that space. Mrs. Systematic, I'll let you have your last thoughts on this conversation.
Yes, I agree completely. I have to just to add to what you're saying is that very often we're trying to we resort to reviving rhetoric and saying, listen, let's just place the blame where we've always placed it. And in doing so, we avoid an opportunity to make real changes, to make real advancements in getting past the problem. Because what we're doing is we say, okay, well, this is the same thing that didn't work for the last, we're in 2017, this is happening in almost 50 years, 40 years. Okay, how is it that we have made no movement? How is it that we're having the same conversations? Obviously, this rhetoric is broken, and we need to embrace an opportunity to make real changes and say, okay, this blaming everything on the myth of white feminism being embraced wholesale by Black women in the so-called Black women in the 70s. We see that's not true. I think that we have spent 10 weeks proving that's not true. And not just because Emunah and Mayanah say so, but because the mothers that were in that space, the ones we are accusing of this thought, are telling you, we don't think that. We don't think that, and this is why we don't think it. And so we really, and they're begging us, and what we're hearing their voices from the past, begging us to stop putting on them something that isn't true. To release, I mean, how powerful is the thought that Moynihan can write something in 1960, and we are still repeating this thought that he implanted on the people. They were imploring the men in the 70s to not repeat after this European, and here are is the great grandchildren doing precisely the same thing in order to tether the sisters now and our daughters, and their daughters to come, because we have yet to separate from this idea that there's a villainous matriarchy out to crush the masculine principle, and we want nothing more than to usurp their authority and infantilize them all and emasculate them all. And so, the solution is to suppress the feminine energy and to relegate it to passive spaces, because in these spaces where she's being active, that's a problem, or that it threatens the masculine. So the only spaces that she's allowed to be in are these passive spaces that can be controlled, limited, or delineated by someone else. She's not allowed to have any type of autonomy or agency, because if she did, it would be like petting the cobra.
Real talk. So for those who have just joined us, you got to stay tuned to see what our next adventure is going to be. You gotta stay tuned. You gotta stay tuned. But for those who just joined us, if you enjoyed this series, feel free to share it with others. Feel free to strike up a dialogue. Feel free to, implore others to go ahead and read and discover. This is how we dispel these inaccuracies in our community, the rhetoric in our community. Just suggest it. They may not have to watch the series, but the next time you hear somebody or you're in a conversation and somebody, it was black, it was feminism. Say, have you ever read the Black Women's Manifesto? Maybe you should give it a read. It's a short read, and then come back and let me know your thoughts. Because the only way we're going to move forward is introducing new information.
That's right.
And so this is what we're doing. If nothing else, we're introducing new information. So as Sister Mayanah said, we could kind of move forward in this very stale, very, very stale conversation. It's like, oh, come on, this again. So with that said, I'm not going to hold you any longer. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I pray everybody continue to have the blessed night. And we'll see you again soon. One.